I used to laugh at based on a true story tags. Then I worked nights at Willow Creek Mall. I'm not going to tell you my real name, or the state. If you're from around there, you'll recognize it anyway. And if the mall is somehow still standing when you hear this, do yourself a favor. Don't take the night shift. I was 31, freshly divorced, sleeping on my brother's couch and taking whatever work I could get. A temp agency called about a security position. Overnight, indoors, decent pay, low activity. Sounded perfect. Willow Creek was one of those dying malls. Half the anchor stores were empty. The fountain was dry and filled with fake plants. If you've ever walked through one of those places on a Sunday morning and felt weirdly sad, imagine that feeling stretched over 8 hours and lit by fluorescent lights. My first night, my supervisor was a guy named Marty. Mid-50s, big belly, thinning hair, permanent coffee breath. He met me at the employee entrance and handed me a ring of keys that looked like it could sink a boat.
Don't lose these, and don't freak out if the building talks back.
I thought he was joking. We went through the basics first. Fire exits, emergency phone, where the janitors kept their supplies, which doors had broken sensors. The security office was upstairs, tucked behind a locked gray door near the old arcade. Inside was a desk, an ancient computer, a mini fridge, and a wall of monitors, 16 cameras covering most of the mall.
Most, not all.
After the tour, we ended up back in the office. Marty poured coffee from a stained thermos, sat down with a grunt, and pulled a laminated sheet out of a drawer. He slid it across the desk to me like it was a contract.
These are the night rules.
I glanced at it. It wasn't long, just 5 bullet points. I said, "Come on now. Is this a prank for the new guy?" He didn't smile.
Read them out loud.
So I did. Do not stare at camera 12 between 2:13 and 2:16 a.m. If you notice any static figures or irregular activity during that time, avert your eyes and log it as feed distortion. Do not rewind, pause, or zoom. If you see a child on any camera after 11:30 p.m., check the opposite floor in person. Do not follow the child into the play area or towards any exits. If the child cannot be located, log as false visual. If the escalators start moving after 1 a.m., hit the emergency stop from the office. Do not approach the escalators in person until they are fully stopped. If you hear store closing announcements over the PA after 1 a.m., do not respond. Do not speak your name out loud until the announcements stop. If the stairwell lights flicker in sequence, ground to level 2, then back down. Exit the building immediately and wait in your car for 5 minutes. If the lights are steady when you re-enter, continue your shift. If not, call me. I laughed halfway through the second rule and had to start again. Marty just watched me with this tired, patient look, like a doctor waiting for a kid to finish making jokes about a needle. "You're serious?" I asked when I finished. He took the sheet back and tapped it. He said,
Last 3 guys didn't make it a full week. One quit halfway through a shift and left the keys on the desk. Another walked out and mailed them back from another state.
"Because of what? The cameras?" "Because they didn't follow the rules." He stood up, clapped me on the shoulder.
Look, kid, most nights you're going to be bored out of your skull. But if something weird happens, just do what this says. Pretend it's superstition, I don't care. It's easier than trying to explain it later.
He left not long after that, with a wave.
Call if you smell smoke, hear screaming, or see a clown. The clown is definitely not supposed to be here.
And then it was just me, the hum of electronics, and the empty mall. The first couple nights were quiet. My routine was simple. Do a walkthrough every hour. Check that all the gates were locked, bathrooms empty, kiosks closed. Then sit in the office, half watching the monitors, half scrolling my phone. Camera 12 covered the food court from the corner near an old burger place. During the day, it probably saw teenagers, strollers, kids with ice cream. At night, it saw rows of dark tables, a dead fountain, and a lot of shadows. The first time I noticed the time was around 1:45 a.m. on my second shift. I glanced at the clock and remembered rule number 1. Don't stare at camera 12 between 2:13 and 2:16. I actually set an alarm on my phone. I told myself it was stupid, but I did it anyway. 2:12 a.m., the alarm buzzed, and I looked up. Camera 12 was fine. Grainy but clear. Same empty food court. 2:13 a.m. I deliberately looked at the other screens. Parking lot. Dark. Entrance by the old Sears. 2:13 a.m. I deliberately looked at the other screens. Parking lot. Dark. Entrance by the old Sears. 2:13 a.m. I deliberately looked at the other screens. Parking lot. Dark. Entrance by the old Sears. 2:13 a.m. I deliberately looked at the other screens. Parking lot. Dark. dark. The central atrium with the skylight, just picking up flickers from passing streetlights. For 3 minutes I refused to look at camera 12. Nothing exploded. No knocking. No voices. At 2:17 I let myself check it. Just tables, chairs, a blurry reflection of overhead lights on the fake marble floor. I almost felt disappointed. The first weird thing happened on my third night. It was 11:47 p.m. I remember the time because I had just logged a walkthrough. I was back in the office, scanning the cameras, when I saw movement on camera 4, upper level, near the small indoor playground. One of those cheap setups, plastic slide, padded floor, a mural of smiling clouds. A kid ran across the frame. Small, wearing a hoodie, bare legs below the hem, no shoes. The image wasn't sharp enough to see the face, but I could see the bounce in the step, that loose, fearless run little kids have. Everything in me went on autopilot. I stood up, grabbed my flashlight, reaching for the door. Then I remembered rule number 2. If you see a child on any camera after 11:30 p.m., check the opposite floor in person. Do not follow the child into the play area. Opposite floor. I hesitated, staring at the monitor. The kid darted behind a plastic tunnel. I told myself it was some kind of glitch, a replay from earlier in the day. But I also couldn't ignore the possibility some kid got left behind. Fine, I muttered. Opposite floor. The opposite floor from that camera was the lower level, beneath the play area, by an empty shoe store and a massage chair kiosk. I jogged there, heart thudding. Not from fear, just the idea of finding a crying kid at midnight. The place was quiet. I checked behind the kiosks, in the shoe store entry, even in the dark corners where teenagers like to hide to vape. No child. No sound at all except the faint buzz of the lights. By the time I made it back to the office, the kid on camera 4 was gone too. I logged it as false visual, possible playback artifact, just like the laminated rules told me to. But I didn't fully believe my own note. It took about a week before I found the article. There was an old corkboard in the break room behind the food court, cluttered with faded flyers, blood drive from 5 years ago, mall Santa needed, stuff like that. Behind everything else was a yellowed newspaper clipping, pinned crookedly. The headline was something like, "Girl 5 dies after mall play area accident." The date was 15 years prior. No picture. Just a short column about a little girl who fell from the top of a play structure, hit her head, and didn't wake up. Paramedics couldn't get through the crowd fast enough. There was some vague line about structural modifications planned that clearly never happened. I stood there a long time, staring at that age, 5. Later that night, sometime after midnight, camera 4 flickered again. For a second I thought I saw something small and hunched sitting at the top of the slide. I didn't go check the opposite floor that time. I just turned away and counted out loud to 30. The night everything came together. There was a storm, thunder like rolling furniture, rain hammering the skylights, wind whining around the doors in long, mournful breaths. It was a Sunday. The mall had closed early. By 10, even the cleaners were gone. I did my rounds, listening to the building settle and groan. Old structures move in storms, at least that's what I told myself. At 1:08 a.m., I was back in the office. I just sat down when I heard it.
Attention, Willow Creek shoppers. The mall will be closing in 15 minutes. Please make your way to the nearest exit.
A woman's voice over the PA. Calm, bored, professional. I froze. The PA system shouldn't have been on. The control panel was right by my elbow, a dusty box with a microphone and toggles that I had never used. It was dark. Did you hear that? The speakers crackled again.
Attention, Willow Creek shoppers. For your safety, please remain where you are. Assistance is on the way.
Rule 4. If you hear store closing announcements after 1 a.m., do not respond. Do not speak your name. I clamped my mouth shut. On camera 5, the main atrium, I saw something move. Not a person, not exactly. The shadows in the center seemed thicker, like shapes were standing up out of them, like a crowd gathering. There was no one in the mall. I knew that. I just walked the whole place. The storm growled. The lights flickered.
Attention, Willow Creek shoppers. For your safety, do not attempt to leave. The exits are currently blocked.
Every instinct screamed at me to get up, to shout, to say, "Who's there?" Instead, I dug my nails into the armrest until they hurt. The PA cut off. Silence. On camera 5, the atrium looked normal again. That's when my phone vibrated in my pocket. I jumped. For a second, I thought it was the mall calling me. As stupid as that sounds. But it was just my alarm. 2:12 a.m. Camera 12 time. I swallowed. My mouth suddenly dry. I should have looked away. I meant to look away. Instead, I turned my head and stared directly at camera 12. At first, it showed what it always showed. The food court. Dark. Silent. Rows of tables. A second passed. Another. Then the picture jumped, like a skipped beat on an old DVD. For a blink, every table was full. People sat eating, talking, laughing, frozen mid-gesture. Kids in bright clothes. A guy in a sports jersey. A woman bending over a stroller. All of it colorless and flat, like someone had pasted a photograph over the feed. The audio in the office changed. The low hum of the building faded under a new sound. A dull roar of voices, echoing and layered, like I was standing in the middle of a crowd.
Attention, Hollow Creek shoppers, the mall will be closing in 15 minutes. Please make your way to the nearest exit.
I couldn't look away. The clock on the wall ticked 2:30. Somewhere in the frozen crowd, a little girl stood up. She was near the far edge of the food court, by a table stacked with trays. Long hair, a dress with some indistinct pattern. She turned her head as if she'd heard something only she could hear, and then everyone started moving at once. It wasn't natural movement. It was like someone hit fast forward. People stood up, mouths open in silent screams. Trays flew, a stroller tipped. The crowd surged toward the camera, faces blurring into streaks of gray. The little girl was swallowed in the rush.
Attention, Hollow Creek shoppers, for your safety, do not run.
Smoke seeped in from the edges of the frame, curling along the ceiling. The picture flickered, breaking into bands of static, then pulling itself back together. Somewhere in the roar, I could hear it, a crying sound. High, breathless, a child calling for someone. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew, on some level, what was happening. I was watching the accident, the one on the clipping. The crowd in the food court panicked, repeating the same impossible 30 seconds again and again, like a looped piece of film. Every time the girl would stand, look up, take one step, and vanish into the chaos. 2:14. I tried to tear my eyes away and couldn't. My vision tunneled around the screen. Something changed in the far right corner. At first I thought it was just more static, but then it moved in a way static shouldn't. It slid behind people, around tables, through the smoke. A shape. Tall, thin, wrongly bent at the joints. It moved slowly, almost lazily, even as everything else jerked in frantic loops. No one in that old memory seemed to see it. But as it drifted into the center of the frame, I had the horrible feeling it could see me.
Attention shoppers, for your safety, stay where you are.
The shape stopped. The gray blur that might have been its head tilted, like someone angling a mirror to catch a reflection. The clock's second hand ticked 2:15. On camera 5, the atrium. I saw the crowd again, just for a heartbeat. Not really there, but there. A reflection on glass that wasn't in front of the glass. One of the shadows turned toward the security office. Toward me. My chair creaked under me as I leaned back without meaning to. Stop watching, something in me whispered. Rule 1, stop watching. I couldn't move. The shape in the food court flickered closer to the camera, without crossing the space in between. One frame it was near the far tables. The next frame it was right in front. So close the whole screen went dark except for the faint outline of a hand. Except it wasn't a hand. The fingers were too long. They kept going, curling around the edges of the image, around the edges of my vision. 2:16. The feed cut out, just static. The sound of the storm crashed back into the room. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding, and almost fell out of the chair. Every monitor was back to normal. Empty mall, dead fountain, silent escalators. My eyes burned. I realized they were full of tears. Okay, I said out loud, my voice shaking. Okay, that's enough. I grabbed my log sheet and wrote down what I'd seen in the simplest words I could. Camera 12. Feed distortion / possible old recording overlay. My hand was still trembling when I set the pen down. That's when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Soft, bare, the kind a little kid would make. They stopped outside the office door. The handle didn't move. But on camera 4, by the play area, a small figure stood at the top of the slide, just a black outline against the mural.
Attention, Hollow Creek shoppers. For your safety, do not attempt to leave the mall.
I didn't follow the rule that time. I left. I grabbed the keys, ran out the back way, and didn't stop until I was in my car with the doors locked. Hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. I waited there for 5 minutes, maybe 10, rain drumming on the roof, expecting at any moment to see something tall and thin walk past my headlights. Nothing did. The mall just sat there, a hulking shadow against the storm. I drove off and didn't go back. The next day, I called Marty and told him I was done. He didn't argue.
Lasted longer than most. You logged it?
Yeah, there was a pause.
You find the clipping yet?
About the girl? Another pause?
Don't think about it too hard, kid. Place has echoes. Some of them are just louder than others.
He hung up before I could ask what he meant. A few months later, I checked the local news site out of morbid curiosity. Hollow Creek Mall was in the headlines again. Electrical fire in the food court. No injuries. The place had been almost entirely empty, but the article mentioned something that made my skin crawl. Investigators believed the fire started in a junction box that hadn't been touched since the mall was built, right around where camera 12 was mounted. The story ended with a line about considering permanent closure. I don't know if they ever tore it down. I won't go back to check. All I know is this. Those security guard horror stories you see online, the ones about rules and cameras and things walking through old footage, some of them are garbage. Some of them are just stories. And some of them are the closest thing we have to a warning. So if you ever find yourself on a night shift, alone in a dying mall, and your supervisor hands you a list of rules that sound insane, follow them, especially the ones about the cameras. You don't want something in an old Echo to realize you're watching, because once it knows you're there, you become part of the replay.